Welcome everyone to this week's coaching session. We've got a really great topic that we're talking about today, which is
what happens to our nervous system when we are moving towards change and transformation, when we know that we want to make a decision on behalf of our body to do something different.
okay.
What that first initial knee-jerk reaction from the body is, which is usually actually to be flooded with all of the reasons that this could not turn out right.
Okay, so you're saying when I know I should be doing something and I finally decide now's the time I'm gonna make a change.
Yes. And I challenge the should.
Yep.
When I know I have a desire to move towards change in a certain area of my life. So it's easy for us. We do a lot of body work, so we can work with the body, on that. But when we're making a decision, we desire change on behalf of our body, and it's something that we know we want, and we've embraced this idea of, okay, this is actually the direction I want to move into.
Okay.
And
so our initial response is sometimes
is honestly to be flooded, yes, with all of the limiting beliefs and all of the reasons why we are going to come up one more time in disappointment. And I love the way that Kate Northrup describes it. She describes it as that is going to always be the initial reaction to any time you're wanting to create change in your life, because your body is always going to work within the narrow band of what it's already experienced before. So if your experience has been, and by the time people get to us, we're usually they have done everything else.
right.
We are their very last. They have exhausted all other avenues of trying to create change.
And do you think there's a difference between internal change and external change? Meaning sometimes change, I want to make a change, and other times change is happening and I have no control over it. You think there's a difference in how we respond to those two different factors?
That's a really interesting question. I believe change and transformation is definitely an inside job. Now, as far as us not being able to control all of the things that are swirling around us, I always tell people we are never going to be able to actually put a halt on that swirling. We're not going to put a halt on the stressors. We're not going to put a halt on everything moving and changing around us. But what we can do is we can be in a different place in our bodies to when we show up and we engage with it, we're showing up completely different. We're showing up in a way where we are able to actually approach it, engage it, and to do with it what we need to do with it.
Got it. So we're talking about when we're ready to make a change and we're committed to doing something different, internally alarms and bells still go off because it's different, it's change, we haven't maybe experienced that before.
Right.
And so our body is telling us we shouldn't do it.
That's right. Our nervous system is actually wired to keep us exactly the same because that is where our body feels safe. That is where we feel safe. We feel safe in familiarity. We feel safe.
Even if it doesn't lead to health, happiness, abundance, right? Like, I feel safe eating the way I've always eaten.
That's right.
I feel safe just doing the exercises I know how to do.
That's right.
I feel safe keeping the job I've always had, or making what I've been making.
That's right.
And so to go outside of that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't feel safe anymore.
Right. So all of the things will flood in. All of the reasons why that is not an option for you will flood in, and it's really important to note that that is exactly what you're going to. That's exactly what's going to happen.
So expect that.
Expect it, and actually not just expect it, but it's something that can be used as fuel if you allow it to. If we can get to a place where we recognize it and say, oh, okay, aha, I'm actually recognizing that I'm coming up with all of the blocks on this, like all the blocks, right? And think of what are all of the things that we all of the stories that we can come
So
up
give me
with.
an example of what you mean by this. So someone comes to us for a red light program.
That's right.
And we sit down with them, do quality of life as far as like, okay, why do you want to make this change?
That's right.
And they can list some really amazing reasons why they want to make the change.
Yes.
And we'll do pre and post measurements on them, and they're going to respond really well to the program.
Right.
But then as soon as they're making that decision, or as soon as, the next day after they've made the decision to do the program,
right,
what's happening?
Right.
What are some examples of what?
I think the biggest one is, this isn't going to work for me. How will I even know if this will work? Nothing's worked for me up until this point. Nothing's worked. Why should I,
Or I've lost 30 pounds 5 different times before.
And gained it back.
And not gained it all back.
Oh yeah. I've been gaining, I hear that all the time, losing and gaining the same 30 pounds for the last 15 years, someone will say. So all of those things will come up. Also, even I hear inside of that, I'm not capable of creating change. I am not capable of making different choices where my meal strategy is concerned. I'm not capable of, I don't drink water. You just all of the reasons, right? I can't get here twice a week. That's impossible. I will tell you, and that's so interesting, and even the time thing, because how much time has one person spent feeling so incarcerated and so miserable inside the confines of the entrapment of their own body? Like, how much time, right? And time just seems to just shift in that way when we start to think about it. Twice a week is nothing. Twice a week, being in here 30 minutes twice a week is nothing compared to all of the time that you have spent just in complete chaos. Anyway, side note.
No, that's great. But that's how it's typically showing up, right? But that's how it's showing up.
And I think it's really important to apply gentleness and to apply grace, like to understand that you said all of the bells, the whistles, the alarms, everything's going off. It's that stop. Do not proceed.
Don't do this, right?
Don't do this. Right.
So how do we recognize that, and how do we proceed through that? Because ultimately we do want some of these things.
Right. And that's the first question. Ask yourself and know ahead of time, what is it that you really want? What do you want? And just like the quality of what do you want, and why do you want it? That it's really important. If this was truly a desire of your own heart, okay, so let's make sure that, number one, we're recognizing, okay, is this just my subconscious taking off with like all the reasons this could be a big fat fail. Like, let's just even just put it out there, right? All the reasons that not only I could be disappointed, but I could be disappointed in myself one more time. Like all of the things, all of the thoughts are gonna come in. Or even, like I said, not just time but money. I'm a single mom, this, that, like all, you know, and really try to identify, okay, first of all, everything you're feeling is valid. Number one, it all came from somewhere, right? It all originated and started somewhere. There was a moment in time that you first had that original thought of that I can't. So first of all, if something is coming up as I can't, that's where you start to make the challenge. Like that, and we can be softer than challenge, but challenge your own. I can't. Challenge it. Ask it. Is that really the truth, or is this your body's way of I can't, making you feel safe because you don't have to show up to the power that's on the other side of the I can't, right? Because there is power available to you on the other side of that I can't. So identify that I can't. Is this I can't really that I can't? Is it really a hard stop? No, right? Do I really not have the funds for this, or is this a choice? Am I choosing not to invest in myself and spend money on myself? I think words are very powerful, because it's not that I can't. Like I can make a choice to make a purchase. It's the truth is that I'm choosing not to. That actually is so much more liberating and freeing, and it gives you so much more room to work and move inside of. And it gives you your power back. You get to own that. You get to own those choices. You know, I am choosing not to for myself right now because of this. But identify like whether or not is it all of your, you know, survival mechanisms taking off with you right now, or is, you know, so number one, challenge the I can't, and ask it, is that the truth? Is this the truth, or is this I choose not to? So that's the first.
And, you know, as we're talking about recognizing that this is going to come up more than once.
All the time.
Right? Like, I shouldn't do this because XYZ.
Yes.
I can recognize it. I can say, you know what, I'm going to choose to do this, but that doesn't mean the next day or the first time it gets hard, it's not going to come up again and say, man, it's a story that came from somewhere.
That's right.
And it's going to continue to show up again.
It is. And actually, it's embedded in our nervous system. It's embedded in the reticular activating system. Like, it is embedded in there. There are neurons that, you know, have supported our way into identifying whether or not we are in a state of safety, relax, and calm and focus, or whether or not we are in a state of survival and alert and alarm, and we're not able to actually focus, actually. So it's very interesting, but retraining that part of your nervous system, number one, that is available to you. You can do that.
It's possible.
But man, it takes repetition and it takes time.
Yeah. So what do you mean by training your nervous system?
So there's a couple of ways to, first of all, identifying whether, you know what system is, you know, in play, and then actually starting to actually ask questions, right? So there's more questions to ask outside of, is the feeling valid? The feeling is always valid. That answer is always going to be yes. I can tell you that right now. What you feel is absolutely valid. 2, identify where did this originate? Where was this birthed? Where was this born? And how long have I been running on it? Because that's really important too. Number 3.
Can I go back to
Yes.
the first one?
Yes.
Maybe even before we ask, is it valid? How do people, and I'm thinking myself, identify the real emotion that we're feeling.
Oh my goodness.
Because that's, I think also part of this is we just automatically say, I don't have the time, I don't have the money, like, this might work, but it might not. So, but there is an emotion tied to all of those things, not just like a quick, well, yeah, those are valid, but like there's a much deeper.
We could spend the whole rest of this entire podcast just on that, because it's really important, okay, to know that. Like, I actually have a very, and I don't mind sharing, I have a very real experience with this, over the last, 4 to 8 weeks, actually, even trying to recognize some of the emotions and what I was feeling about fundraising, and what came through as a result of that. And I'm trying to identify with what I was feeling, and I couldn't even articulate or put words to. I knew I was sensing emotions. I knew I felt overwhelmed, but to tell you, and I knew it felt awful. I could tell you that, but I really couldn't pinpoint it until the wheels of emotions. There's a chart actually for that, and after looking at it and identifying some of the emotions I was feeling, inferior, I was feeling weak, I was feeling overwhelmed, I was feeling frustrated, and as I was moving through some of what I was actually feeling, I knew that my reticular activating system was like at a 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 over, and I was like, it makes no sense, until I figured out that when I really sat with it for some time, it really came down to the fact that I felt that asking for money, no matter what the cause was, made me weak, made me inferior. I was struggling with my hyper independence. I have a hyper ultra independent streak, and I didn't realize that I had already put up a ton of walls and a ton of blocks. And the reason that fundraising was so uncomfortable was because I was actually dealing with all of these emotions that were actually vibrating underneath the surface that I had no idea was actually affecting my ability to actually enjoy the process of what I was doing. It was really robbing me actually of that joy, because guess what, I wanted to do
on
it.
the surface. I just don't like fundraising.
On the surface you can say that, oh, I just hate this, I hate fundraising, this is awful, but the truth is I had such a passion and a desire to come full circle and raise money on behalf of an amazing cause. But I didn't realize like all these underlying emotions were actually like standing in the way of me being able to participate in that as all of myself. But man, what a gift it was, and what a release it was to tie it back and say, oh my gosh, the reason like this is so uncomfortable and I just want to like quit every single day, like it is because of all of this. So it was having to do a really huge clearing and a retraining, of saying like, okay, wow, like first of all, like, does that hyper ultra independent serve me in this situation? It definitely does not. Does my hyper ultra independence come from being placed in a state of survival? Absolutely. But being able to recognize that is so freeing that you're like, oh, wow. Like, wow. So, some really good. I love that stuff.
Yeah. So not just immediately, like pausing to try to understand what's the emotion behind the emotion.
Yes.
Right? Or not even the emotion behind the emotion, but the emotion behind the reason.
Yes.
Or the roadblock, or because it is easy to say, well, that's too expensive, or I don't have the time.
Right.
But there's really a different emotion that is the reason you're telling yourself that.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, before we ask, is that emotion or feeling valid, right? Like, it's like, what is that to begin with?
Absolutely.
Okay. So let's say that we have we
right?
pinpointed the underlying
and what's really helpful,
emotion.
and maybe we need to make available that the emotion wheel. I don't know what you call that. It's a graph. It's a chart. But what I love about it's not just a list of emotions. It actually categorizes like where the emotion is rooted. So it's not just shame, and I don't want to botch it up. But that's fear, or that's anger, or that's sadness, or that. So it actually it gives you an idea of like, oh gosh, this is coming from fear. That actually helps too, to identify inferiority. Oh, that's coming from fear. Frustration, that's coming from anger. So that's also really helpful, because then to ask yourself like, oh wow, like, is that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
When was the first time that I felt angry about this sort of thing? Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So we're identifying the emotion.
That's right.
We're saying, is this valid? And then we're asking.
So we already asked, when do we remember feeling that the first time?
Okay.
Right. And then the very next question to ask is this the truth now? Right? Because it number one, it could have never been the truth, or number two, it could have very well been the truth to keep you safe, right? And your whole body's going to remember that. So, is it true now is really important. Does this serve me now? Clearly, I was not being served now in the midst of all of that belief. It was not serving me well. It was an old belief that served a purpose for when it served a purpose, or we can call it wounds. I like calling things, but was I really operating now? Like, was I operating out of that much older, deeper wound? Yes, absolutely. Do I want to now move towards operating out of my worth and what I have learned about all of that? And that was a resounding yes. So being able to identify, is that true now? Does that serve me now? Am I operating out of a much older and deeper wound?
Okay. Are there any other questions? Like, how do you keep going with that, or is it really just a recognition of?
So recognizing, it's very freeing to say, like, is that true now? And to actually to hear yourself, a lot of times you're going to be like, wow, no, it's really not. That's incredible. There is one more question beyond that. If that's not true, what is true, and what do you want to believe about this?
Yeah. Okay, that was gonna be my next question. Is like, okay, how do we flip that then?
But what do you want to believe about this? And that is where the whole retraining of the, RAS comes from too, because you'll even notice that you're not even comfortable sitting with certain words, right? Like, that word fundraising, you could get a very visceral, like, I all of a sudden feel like I'm going to get hot and sweaty and I feel a little nauseous, right? Say with weight loss, say that word, like literally, oh gosh, yeah, which I don't believe in, clearly, but being able to kind of, it's not just because this is in your body. It's not, it's not just, you're going to need to do a whole mind body type of, connecting and tuning into and figuring out like, how does that thing make me feel? But how do you feel when you transmute it or you rewrite the narrative, right? So being able to, and let me see if I can,
and keeping that in front of you,
and you have to keep it in front of you.
Yeah.
So writing it down on paper, like it's very important. You've got to get it somehow out of your body, right, and onto paper. But being able to say, what do I want to believe about this? I truly want to believe that I am an integrated, interdependent woman. I know when it's appropriate to ask for help, and I ask for help when I need it, because I am worthy and I am deserving of being helped and loved and supported. I am worthy of that. That's how you start to and start, writing it down, right? I am passionate about raising money for good causes on behalf of other people, because it is full circle moment for me, right? It is a rising from the ashes, and if I can do it, anyone can. And so just being able to put all of that in front of you, and to remember, that, there, like I said, so much more you have access to beyond that.
And so what do you recommend? Just you've kind of already touched on this, but writing all of this out, and then those kind of end of the what I want to believe, really staying focused on those through the journey of in this case, let's say an 8-week program,
right?
I'm going to make sure that I'm keeping these statements, these comments, these
front of. Yes, and actually, it's funny because I have I have everything like in notes here, but I even have my own affirmations of moving from, and I think it's important. I have a whole notes dedicated to this. Rewriting the narratives. What are my affirmations? What are my confessions? And what are my I have from wounds to worth. What are my wounds to worth? And so I keep that in front of me, right? So when I am struggling, I can read this, and there's a safety that starts to be created when I'm just like, oh yeah, like just all the things. I'm not going to share those things, but yeah.
Inquiring minds want to know.
That's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah. Okay, and then I think we're to the point where we've gotten to kind of half of it, which is the actual mental
That's right.
recognition of it.
That's right.
There's still a body component to that, where my nervous system freaks out. I feel like stressed and tense and anxiety around this decision.
Oh, yes.
Or doing this thing.
Right.
And so I think next week, let's talk about that part of it.
Yes.
What's our nervous system doing?
Yes.
Because we've mentioned nervous system a handful of times.
Yes.
And then, we consciously we know, but subconsciously our body is still reacting. So what are some things? Next week's going to be a little bit more like action oriented.
Yes.
And here are some things that you can physically do. To begin to create more balance in your nervous system. Because we can say those things, but unless our body is in sync with,
that's right,
really calming that nervous system down
right.
and anchoring it to these new beliefs almost, then we're still going to have that anxiety response. And it's just going to be like, we're just saying something and not actually believing it.
That's right. Or your body's, you're trying to say it, but your body's saying the direct opposite of that.
Yep.
Your body's saying something completely different.
Yep.
And if you've ever dealt with anxiety, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So, yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, awesome. So next week we're going to dive a lot more into the same topic, but nervous system balancing, and how do we help the nervous system make change.
Yes.
Help aid the nervous system in helping us make change, I guess. Yeah. Okay. All right, everyone. Have an amazing week. We will be back next week.